So, morning po sir. Ito po yung interview for Mendiola Narratives. And for the record lang po, pwede pong pakistate yung full name nyo and your birthday.
Yeah, okay. My full name is Ricardo T. My birthday is October 29, 1957.
Okay po. So, so before I go into September 21, 1983, meron po kasing may template po kami ng questionnaire for Mendiola. So, so naging involved po ba kayo ever sa isang kilusan? And, yeah, naging involved po ba kayo?
Yeah, actually, kasi I was not involved in any student movement or even parang protest movement until 78 yata. But I was never affiliated with any group or organization. It's just na pag mga mass movements, there were times where I think 78 yun, yung nagkaroon ng noise barrage because of the election, one of the elections held during the Marcos time, when they held the first election for the Batasang Pambansa. And then very fishy yung nagkaroon ng noise barrage. So I participated in that. And then in the early 80s, hindi masyado. No? It was certain issues, again, mga mass movements galing dito sa UP. I would sometimes join them. There was, for example, yung laban sa Education Act of 1980, I think that was. No? Nagkaroon ng mga protest movements dito, marches sa Commonwealth. Prior to that, I think even high school nga pala before martial law, again, not as part of a group, no, but individual. Kasi I was nasa science ako, Philippine Science High School. And when I was a student, when I entered there, wala pang building yung high school. We were squatting in a building dun sa Quezon Memorial. And since that was 1970, yung mga student, height of student activism yun. So we had rallies to protest the non-issuance of the building. Kailangan mga scholars ng bayan ito and all of that, and walang building. So Marcos had promised the building. So there were several rallies at that time. And so, miski freshmen kami, we joined the rallies also.
So freshman high school po?
Yeah, freshman high school. So this is 1970, 71. And then yun nga, nagkaroon ng martial law. So everything clamped down. And then, so tapos I got into UP as a student. So more or less yung focus ko, of course, was on studies. But after the studies, by 79, yun nga, during some incidents, yung elections nga, there were instances where we would participate.
Pero hindi wala po kayong formal membership?
No, walang membership. No. In fact, I never was formally involved with any. It's really just as individual participation. Tsaka one reason I also wanted to join this was kasi I was already in history at that time. So sabi ko, gusto kong i-document sana yung mga nangyayari. At least if not photographically, but in terms of having seen it. Tapos susulatin ko sa diary and things like that. So parang to me, kasi it was history in the making. And as a historian, kailangan i-document yun.
Yung doon po nung nasa Pisay pa po kayo, may mga student organizations din po noon from within Pisay na nag-organize dun sa rallies.
Yes. They were very strong yung, I think the main organization was, of course, what they call the Supreme Student Council. And that was quite radical at the time. So talagang hindi lang issue ng land but also issue of gasoline prices, mga ganun. So it was a very well informed body of students. Parang hindi lang sarado yung but it was really very socially committed, mga ganun. But again, all of that changed once martial law was. Kaya we were one of the last schools to be reopened. Martial law was declared September 21, 72. And sarado kami until, I think, late November. And almost all the other schools had opened. I think even UP nagbukas na. So parang feeling namin, we were being punished for being such a radical and sobrang activist school. So, in fact, when we were reopened in November, I think, one of the first things we had to do was magkaroon ng parang civic action. And since may C80 sa high school, so the first thing we had to do was maghanap ng mga radical graffiti and stuff and paint over it. Although yung area of operations namin was yung village and there was no graffiti there. So marami kami mga pintura but we actually had no use of that. So in the end, we tried to paint the curves na lang para gamitin yung pintura. I think we only found one piece of graffiti and talagang hinanap namin. But parang we saw that as a kind of punishment to the school because it was so activist.
Actually, sir, tatanungin ko nga po kayo kung naabutan niyo dito yung FQS pero...
Yes, to some extent, no? Kasi when the FQS broke out, I was elementary school, grade 6 na yata ako, ready to go to high school. But my father was teaching here, no? So talagang we knew what was happening and then suspended my classes. But yung sentiments ng family was with the FQS rallies. And so we went here twice to give food and to give support to them. And then nakikinig kami sa UP region, UP radio. And we kept on tabs. And yung sympathies ng family were with the students here. But also, of course, grade 6 pa lang ako, so I was not that fully aware. But only later on did I realize yung significance ng nangyayari.
Kahit po nung mga panahon yung 70s, parang di ba, parang yung mga students talaga, they were very politically aware.
That's right.
Kahit po nung high school, kahit high school pa lang.
Kaya actually, I think Philippine Science High School was rather unique because it was one of the most active high schools. Kasi at that time, yung student movement was mainly college. But talagang for Science High School, for PSP design, to be doing that, parang it was really unique, it was different. And some would say na siguro kasi this is the result of yung mas matalino estudyante, better. It's really the cream of the crop, so more aware talaga kami. Tsaka since it was a government institution and we were receiving stipends, parang nandun din yung concept na scholar ng bayan, that responsibility to the people and all of that.
Right. So, punta naman po tayo dun sa mga alaala niyo ng Mendiola.
Yeah.
So, kailan po kayo unang napadpad sa Mendiola?
Of course, I think we would go, I think even before martial law, nakapasok kami sa Malacanang, but it was, of course, I don't remember very much of that. But naririnig namin yung tungkol sa Mendiola during martial law. And during the earlier periods, hindi ako sumasama masyado sa mga rallies. But later on, it became a very contested space. And we would read about it in the newspapers. But physically, I would go there maybe, kasi nung college ako, I was a GSIS scholar, and I had to go to the GSIS building in Manila every month to get my stipend. And after that, I would go to Recto, Rizal Avenue, punta natin sa mga magazine stands, and sometimes I would get as far as Mendiola. So nakita ko yung mga barikada and all of that, and parang contested space talaga. But I did not really go through the barricades or anything at that point. So nakita ko lang yun. And then later, of course, we would have incidents na yung mga violent dispersals, which I was not really too involved in yet until I think the main change would have been after the assassination of Ninoy. Then doon talaga medyo sumama na ako sa mga.
So, nung 70s, kasi po, nag-focus po kasi kami doon talaga sa mga violent events.
Yes.
I was wondering po kung meron din po talagang mga protest actions during the 70s, during martial law in Mendiola.
I don't remember. The closest I would really remember is in the action to the Batasang Pambansa election, 1978. But it was still not that confrontational kasi malakas yung military and there was not that much public support. But, I mean, public support in the sense na maraming galit already by that time. But there was no way of expressing it. So, puro peaceful, it's mga noise barrage. And one thing that we should remember is the press was censored.
Yes.
So there's really very little reportage of what was going on. And hindi pa lumalabas yung alternative press by the 70s. So it's very hard to find actual documentation. After 1983, medyo doon marami ng alternative press na lumabas. Although I think in the late 70s there were two alternative newspapers that had already come out, yung We Forum.
Paano malayo po yan.
Yes, so
Kaya nasarap po sila eh.
yes.
Yeah.
But yung We Forum kasi was, I used to have a very complete set of that until nawala yung iba. But kasi already I could see this was an interesting development, mga late 70s naman. And it was rather difficult to come by kasi unlike the big newspapers na binibenta sa lahat ng newsstands, this was really available only in certain areas.
Like, ano po
And
yan?
usually only in Rizal Avenue. And then to disguise it, parang they would make it appear like it's a college paper na kasi University Belt doon. So usually they had a picture of a co-ed in the front page, and then mga parang school-related news, but then actually the media news was there, the mga headlines, and then you were inclined to look inside, and then nandun yung mga media columns, yung editorials, which are really becoming more and more anti-Marcos. But it was really first very restricted until later on, but that was parang the entry point ng mga for the alternative press. Yeah.
Yung ano po na yung alternative press na yun during that time, parang nasa university belt, so mainly students po yung...
Yes, students, and then, or yung clientele was mainly students. In fact, I think kasi it was really also written in English, may konting Tagalog yata, but essentially it was in English, so student population yung target niya.
Sige po. So, nung 1978 po kayo unang napagpag sa
I
Mendiola
think that's
for a protest action. And parang, ano po yung, pero out of your own volition. Hindi po.
Yeah. One thing kasi about a lot of the protest actions at that time, especially once the dispersals were occurring, was nagtatighten ng security within the various protest groups. And almost always they would protect the women and the other younger people. Magkakapit-bisig sila. So they had a protective cordon para hindi walang makapasok na outside elements to sow disorder. At the same time, they'll protect also the people within. So para may control. Which I, as a parang historian, didn't like. I wanted to see as many sides as I could. So ayokong matali doon sa isang grupo. And yun lang makikita mo. So always when I was in those rallies, I would be climbing buildings and going around places. So ayokong matali doon sa isang particular group. So of course marami akong kilala, mga former students ko nandun and all of that. But I wanted to be free to go around.
Covered.
Right.
So, nakalagay po dito, pwede niyo po bang ilarawan yung itsura ng Mendiola noong una niyo po siyang nakita?
Well, the first time I saw it, medyo tahimik kasi there was no movement going on. Yun nga, I mean, since I was going around Recto and sa Avenue looking for books and magazines, and I would go there, tahimik siya, and then you could see that there are schools and there are students, pero mukhang forbidding din siya because you knew at the end of it was Malacanang, Marcos was there, so parang may sense of foreboding ka. Every time we would pass Mendiola, you'd see there's someone there, there's something there na seat of power, so parang it was a threatening kind of thing. And then later on, of course, as the barricades were there, they were never actually removed. They were on the side sometimes pag walang rally, but then you could see that they were always there, pwedeng i-deploy agad.
Kailan po unang nagkaroon ng, naabutan niyo po ba yung Mendiola nang wala pang barricade? So talagang meron
Yeah, I think the first, before martial law, kasi I think we went there before martial law. And mukhang tahimik talaga siya. Mukhang tahimik siya because it's maraming puno, and then you have all the educational institutions there. So it really looked like a peaceful place at first. And then in fact, when there are no rallies, then you go there late in the afternoon, really parang peaceful. Or if you go there on Sunday, really parang there's nothing else. It's since there are more trees there than in other places in Manila, parang yun ang isang impression ko that it was a very peaceful place.
Opo. Actually, pumunta rin po kami lately din lang po sa Mendiola. So, totoo nga po yun na kahit ngayon, talagang generally peaceful yung area.
Yes.
Pero when you parang lumabas po kayo ng
Yeah.
konti,
Oo.
the Peace Arch, and then yung
Right,
marami
right.
pong layers ng barricade.
Right. Oo. But yun nga, I think before all of that crisis started, early years of martial law, talagang wala. It was really relatively clean.
And then wala po yung parang gate po doon.
Yeah, actually wala. It was really, in fact,
Okay.
di ba may bridge kasi doon. We
Okay.
never noticed the bridge actually. So kasi parang tuloy-tuloy lang. So there's only everybody's thought what Mendiola, which is yung bridge doon kasi hindi namin napansin na.
So, yung mga pagpunta niyo po sa Mendiola, yung first time niyo po sa 1978, naulit pa po yun.
I think kasi again, I was frequenting that particular area, not so much to see the place, but to buy books and magazines and things like that.
Like, after po nung 1978, sumali pa po kayo sa iba pang mga social mobilizations?
I don't
in Mendiola?
think so. I think nagkaroon ng social mobilization sa UP but not to Mendiola. I think kasi may mga issues regarding tuition fees. I know some of my students were very active in some of that, in student representation. So most of it was actually UP issues after that. So medyo bihira pa pumunta dun sa Mendiola area unless I had something, but not as part of my protest groups yet.
Right. So, tama po ba, 1978 and 1983?
Yeah. So medyo that was also when I had just graduated. I graduated po in 78. So I began teaching 79. And then, so after that, nag-focus ako sa teaching and studies. So by 82, 83, I had already more or less stabilized ako sa teaching, which is why it was a little easier to begin moving out. Kasi yung first years of teaching, talagang you have to prepare, you have to work, but then after you get used to it, medyo get the hang of it, kaya mo na.
So, nung mga pagpunta niyo po sa Mendiola, kasama niyo po yung mga friends niyo?
Usually, in the early times, no, I was usually alone. Until the big movements came, then I would sometimes be with friends, but usually I would also go alone. Or even if I join groups from UP, once I get there, medyo iwalay na ako, ikot.
Pero it's always parang ang primary consideration niyo po was to cover the event.
Yeah, right.
But
then also to express displeasure, but then parang what I really wanted to do was to document it sana. Kasi again, since the press was controlled, there was no other way to get information or to find out what happened.
Dun po sa mga napuntahan niyo pong protest sa Mendiola, ano po usually yung composition ng crowd?
Usually I would be with yung UP group, no? So a lot of faculty, a lot of students, some of them are my students in fact, and then faculty, and then it's kasi when you start out from UP, usually may mga buses and then you're dropped off somewhere in Manila, lalakad na lang kayo. But as you get closer to it, it will usually become mixed, and you have students from other schools, and then you have other cause-oriented groups, mga artists. Sometimes I would know people there also because, like for example, one of the groups that would participate would be yung concerned artists of the Philippines, yung writers groups, and I knew some of these people then, no, sina Armando Malay, for example, and others. So I would run into them there. So it became easy to move from one place to another because marami akong kilala sa UP group, and marami akong kilala sa writers group. So almost everywhere I was going, kilala ako naman. So it was, in fact, parang reunion yung ano eh. So it never felt that I was parang that alone or
Pero bago po nung 1983, sino po yung nag-organize ng mga protest action sa Mendiola?
I think at least from UP, it would be the student council, of course, and then there would be maraming NGOs kasi at that time, and I think the issue at that time was hindi sila masyadong united yet. So you would have urban poor, you would have student groups sa Manila, sa University Belt, mga student councils doon. And then you would also have, I think, even yung mga those who were in prison, yung association ng former detainees, yung task force detainees, mga ganun. So very strong yung mga presence nila. And then labor organizations, labor groups, yun.
But it's always a mix po ng sectarial groups, student
yes,
groups.
So, right.
And usually po, ano po yung cause ng pag-mobilize nila? Like, may events po ba?
Yeah, of course, after 1983, there were many significant causes, no reactions to violence. Before 86, I think some of it was school-related, so that tuition increases. You would also have, I think, one thing that was very contested at that time was the Education Act. Because parang the government was really clamping down on education, and since that was one of the last sign of freedom in the country, when the government was really bent on passing this Education Act, that led to a lot of these protests sa Mendiola. And then since yung mag-decide was yung Batasang Pambansa, after the Mendiola issues, it was right here sa Commonwealth Avenue sa harap ng Batasan.
Actually, sir, curious lang po, bago yung 83, bukod po sa Mendiola, saan pa po nag-mobilize yung mga tao?
Yeah, the other place of course was San Bonifacio. Used to be Plaza Miranda kasi by the late 70s, masyadong maliit na yung Plaza Miranda. And I think the government had done some, I think they had put mga vendors and other things there para hindi talaga makamobilize. So Plaza Miranda never was the same again after that. Even today, you cannot mobilize in Plaza Miranda anymore. So, yung naging alternative was San Bonifacio. And then, that was very symbolic kasi nandun si Bonifacio, and then it's a big enough space. And then, Luneta was the other place also. And then, of course, since it was very difficult to mobilize, kasi especially the government began cracking down, kailangan may permit, so UP was also one place of easy mobilization because yung sense of autonomy natin dito, it was easy to mobilize, that people could come here and to be free from arrest and mga warrants, mga this permit to rally dito, it was relatively free from that. Kaya this was one very good place of mobilization.
Tingin niyo po, bakit kaya Mendiola yung pinupuntahan mo?
Yeah, well, of course, Mendiola was kasi that's the closest they could get actually to Malacanang. During the first quarter storm, nakapasok sila sa Malacanang. So right up to the gate. So I think that created so much paranoia within the presidential security group and Marcos that pinalayo nila yung confrontation area. So that became the bridge of Mendiola. But prior to that, actually, it was really quite easy to go right to Malacanang itself. So in terms of yung security, kaya nilagay sa Mendiola. And Mendiola is also one of 3 entry points kasi Mendiola is from Recto, and then the other one you have JP Laurel coming from Nagdahan. But yung JP Laurel side is not a very good place to mobilize because heavy traffic, and the universities are in the Mendiola side. So then there's another access road from the other side from Ayala Bridge, but that passes a residential area. And in fact, even the JP Laurel side is parang partly residential, so it's a little difficult to go there. So Mendiola is very significant kasi it's right in the middle, and then from University Belt, pasok ka dun. And then the fact that you have schools there also, if you mobilize those schools, nandun na sila right away. So, but again, since medyo takot yung security to allow them in, they pushed the security zone up to the bridge.
Pero bakit po kayo kahit nilagyan na nila ng barricades, tight security,
Yeah.
patuloy pa rin pumupunta po din yung mga...
Nandun kasi yung symbolism. So, especially I think after Plaza Miranda was closed off, Mendiola became the next significant place. Because even Liwasang Bonifacio, maganda yung area, you can put a lot of people, but it's still, who are you shouting to? You're shouting to yourselves, makikinig ba yung post office? Hindi naman. No? So the Mendiola thing was more significant because nandun ang Malacanang. Your target really is to get Malacanang to listen. And so even if you're stopped in the bridge, yung symbolic act of threatening or challenging authority by going to the bridge, or even, kaya naging very symbolic to cross the bridge. There were so many attempts to cross the bridge kasi even the act of crossing the bridge, you were able to get through the security line.
Ang liit-liit.
Maliit, ang liit ng bridge. So it's really very, yung symbolic act actually. So I think the symbolism was very, very strong. Because you're, again, parang, unlike the FQS, which really got to the gates of Malacanang, after that, kasi the security people knew that keep them away, the further away, the better. But you could not go, actually, the thing about Mendiola also is, right after the, if you go away from Malacanang, very busy na yung traffic. The recto area, and then yung intersection doon. No? So that's why it also made it easy to mobilize there. But then it is that fairly small area between the intersection and the bridge that really became the symbolic protest place. So, and in fact, parang para marinig sila ng Malacanang. So I mean, you're still far out, but it's much more effective than, let's say, Bonifacio, Liwasang Bonifacio, or even Luneta, ang layo ng Luneta. So, the thing is, you're there really literally within stone's throw of Malacanang. So, almost face to face.
And, so, doon po sa mga pagpunta niyo po sa Mendiola, sa participation niyo po and witnessing these protests, ano po yung feeling niyo pag nasa Mendiola kayo? And what do you feel afterwards when you're not in Mendiola?
Yeah, of course, there was a very strong sense of excitement all the time. And then, if the security on the other side was, parang, you could feel that the security was not going to attack you actually. Because you could see how they were outfitted, you could see how they were behaving. So, alam ko,
paano niyo po malalaman ko?
yeah, yung ano yung karga nila, I'll show you some pictures later on because once you, for example, see fire trucks arranged behind, alam mo, they mean business. No, they're going to disperse the crowd. Pag wala yung mga fire trucks na yun, then they will tolerate you. So, peaceful dispersal yan. So, if there is no major threat from the other side, parang party actually. It's really, it was exciting. It was, I mean, since we were with a lot of friends, maraming kilala, it was an exciting time. And then the thing that you're expressing galit sa government, which you could not have done anywhere else, parang it's an emotional way. It's a way of letting things get out also. So parang expressing your anger. So after the events, you go home, medyo satisfied ka that you tried to do something that day. The thing is, of course, pag alam mo na confrontational talaga, let's say the group is so large, sometimes kasi mga maliliit na group also, okay, there's no confrontation there. The police simply block off the way. But kung malaki talaga, then you can feel na malakas ang galit ng tao. Such as September 21, 83. That was very, you could really feel that something was going to happen. And then later on, I think in 84, I was there also once in 84 and 85. Talagang you could sense it. Not only just by looking at them, but may mga nagsasabi na rin na they're going to do something, may mangyayari.
Yung, nagkaroon po ba ng evolution, yung expressions ng kumbaga anger against Marcos? Like, for example, before, siguro po it was just speeches, placards.
Yes.
But
I'm not too sure exactly how it developed. But yeah, I think nagkaroon ng changes. As after the speeches kasi, there was especially after the assassination of Ninoy, the government really began to clamp down, no permit, no rally, ganun. So they devised other ways. So sige, hindi ito rally. They call it something else, mass meeting, but they came up with all sorts of other ways to describe it except rally. So they said, hindi naman rally ito, so we don't need a permit for this. So you have all these ways of circumventing because every time something happens, Marcos would issue decrees, so dito pwede, dito pwede. So there were ways to circumvent it. This is not what he's talking about. This is a peaceful gathering, mga ganun. So I remember one of the rallies, not in Mendiola, but in Makati, was really women and children. So sabi na, this is not a protest. This is a parade of women and children. So how can you disperse this?
And
So,
actually, I read din po yung Ugarte Field is privately owned.
Yes. That came later. That's already 83. I think before 83, the turning point in 83 kasi was the business sector got involved. And since Ugarte Field was private, that became the other major assembly point.
Right. So, siguro pupunta na po tayo sa September 21, 83. Pero before po nun, kasi immediately after Ninoy's assassination, talaga pong nagkaroon ng napakaraming mobilizations. Kumbaga na-politicize po yung mga Pilipino. And naging remarkable din po nga dito yung forms of protest. Katulad yung mga sa Mr. and Miss Specialization, mga nakita po akong confetti protest,
sa Makati yun,
window shopping at Rustans, jogging for justice.
That's right.
Ano pong take nyo doon?
Yeah, again, kasi it's one thing that most people have forgotten, yung element of control during that time. So, maraming takot. In fact, that's one reason why they say martial law lasted so long, is because maraming takot and they didn't want to go out. And parang the feeling was that you're alone. So in a way, what happened was when Ninoy was parang that united, and then people realized na hindi pala ako nag-iisa. I mean, that became the slogan. So everybody realized na ang dami palang galit. It's not just me, it's not just my family, it's not just my friends, pero ang dami palang galit. So that began to spill out. And one reason, of course, why nobody knew the others were angry was controlling media. You could not sense it. You could not sense it in TV, you could not sense it in radio. Everything was controlled. So the thing that, how we got the news at that time was yung tinatawag na, there was a period where we had Xerox journalism or something like that. And also, kasi walang lumalabas dito, so what was coming outside, some of the issues of Time and Newsweek were actually being banned here. They were not allowed to circulate. Pagdating, confiscate na lahat.
Sino pinag-produce ng original yung mga Xerox?
That we never found out. No, basta na lang, like here in UP, bigla na lang may lalabas, oh, this is the article that came out in Far Eastern Economic Review.
Usually foreign,
Yeah, because we could not get access. Ideally kasi dapat, they were being sold in bookstores, pero bigla na lang if it's critical of the government, it's unavailable. There were times also when things like Panorama were censored because may critical art hindi lumabas. So we were really wala pang internet and all of that. So it's really the only source of your information was from the outside. And we had relatives abroad or you have OFWs abroad who would send Xerox copies of some of these. And once they get here, it's a Xerox na ng tao and then it will spread far and wide.
Pero kailan po nauso yung mga Xerox?
Maybe by 81, I think, 80, 81, or even late 70s na siguro. Because there was a lot of critical comment na in US newspapers and it never made it here. So I think by the late 70s, 79, 80, ganun. So that Xerox journalism was one way of circumventing it. And that's before Ninoy is killed actually. But it was ironic that in order to find out what was happening here, you have to turn to foreign media to find out what's happening here kasi unreliable yung local media na.
Pero ano po ba, kung ika-capture po yung atmosphere, general atmosphere between yung assassination po ni Ninoy and September 21, ano po yung picture?
It was first it was shock. No? Almost 21 ako, I didn't take that very seriously actually in the beginning. Maraming nagsasabi na dadating na si Ninoy to the underground. But a lot of younger people didn't even know who Ninoy was. Ako, even my idea of Ninoy was very hazy at that time because when martial law was declared na high school ako. So I didn't have that much awareness of the pre-martial law politics. But all we knew was that he was in prison nga, and he was allowed to go to the States, and then he was giving speeches. Ayun, yung speeches ni Ninoy abroad, those were not allowed to be aired here. So every time something came out, yun yung Xerox journalism na palabas. But very few, I think very few people actually, I mean among the younger people especially, very few people knew who he was. But a lot of people were going to the airport. So may bulong-bulong dyan na he's arriving today. And to me, I didn't give it any second thought. He's arriving today, okay. And then later you had heard the news na may event, something happened, and we weren't sure yet what happened, then assassinated pala siya. That was a great sense of shock. And I think what most people don't realize is, again, the control of media was so strong that talaga it took rumors to circulate the news. The official media was not coming out with any statements. And then in fact, nagkaroon ng power blackout. It was so bad that even the traffic lights were out, so nagkaroon ng traffic snarls. And so that's one thing that very few people remember now. Na, aside from the actual shooting, there were these corollary events that took place at the same time, which we later on believe was part of yung news blackout. Because if there's no electricity, how can the correspondents send the stories abroad and all of that? So parang nagkaroon ng news blackout. And then for a long time, we didn't know the exact specifics talaga. Okay, binaril siya, but and then later on, we came out with the story that si Galman yung bumaril, yung gunman story, but everybody thought it was preposterous. So aside from this shock, it was really lumabas tuloy ang galit ng tao during that time. I think it was the next day or 2 days later after the event that UP began to organize protests here. And at that time, wala pang idea of leadership, hindi pa ganun kalakas. Because again, for all those years under martial law, medyo naging soft na yung university. It was not that, I mean, even though there were student protests, it was not like the 1970s, early 70s. So, very few people had wanted to join before that. But by 83, almost 2 or 3 days later, dun talaga, a lot of people were angry. They wanted to express their disgust, but how was one going to do it? Independent. I mean, how do you do what do you do? So I think one of the rallies here was, I think, 2 days later or the day after, parang leaderless yung movement, yung protest. A lot of people wanted to do something, but walang leader. And I remember one point that happened here was si Boots Aquino came, and then kamukha niya si Ninoy. So a lot of people thought, but hindi naman si Ninoy yun. And then even Chris Aquino was here several times. So
12 years old pa lang po siya.
yeah, in fact, I have a picture of her also when she was here. So nandun yung sense of outrage, yung sense of anger, but what to do about it? Nobody, parang the government was washing its hands from it. Marcos was sick at that time, so talagang there was no public statement from Malacanang for a long time. So what are we going to do about this? And so parang leaderless yung movement. And then, so you have all these other groups that rise up after that, yung August 21 movement, and then you have other groups, yung Jaja, or Justice for Aquino, Justice for All, and you have all these other groups rising up. But again, the problem is walang one group. It's many groups spread out, and then led by different people. So that allowed more people to join in because mixed yung groups. But again, there was no strong, I mean, the feeling was the same. Anger at Marcos, kailangan palitan na yung sistema, and all of that. But how was one going to do that? That was the main problem. So rallies yung first idea. And since the newspapers did not put news about this, there started a plan to boycott the newspapers. And in fact, nagkaroon ng, in front of Mascom, may parang symbolic burning of newspapers doon. I think it was September 21 din. Kasi what happened from August 21 to September 21 was medyo confused nga yung tao, and then the immediate focus right after August 21 was Aquino himself, the body. So the body was eventually brought to Times Street, and doon nag-congregate yung mga tao. So I went there also. I saw the body, all of that. So that was one of the main focal points of resistance at that point. Pero hindi naman pwede doon palagi. And then eventually, because it was so many people were going to the Times Street residence, nilipat nila yung labi ni Aquino to Santo Domingo Church. And that was a major mass movement because ang daming sumama. And I was there also. I covered the whole movement from Times to Santo Domingo. So from there, Santo Domingo became the next major protest place kasi nandun yung mas malaking grounds, and then it really attracted all these people. Parang the church was a bit reluctant I think at that time, pero eventually they opened up. In fact, parang the church was rather strict in the beginning, trying to limit the number of people kasi baka ma-damage yung church or whatever. But eventually they had to give in to the public, pinusan nila to the public. And then after that, the next big thing was the funeral. And then doon talaga nakita ng tao na ang dami palang pareho ang feelings. No? So the sense of anger, frustration, wanting to do something about it. And then it became even more frustrating after that when the day after, walang reporters in newspapers. I think they say about 1 million participated in the funeral of Ninoy, but the next day, such a big news event, ano yung headline yata ng bulletin? Isang tao namatay because may lightning tumanang kidlat sa puno. And so that made the outrage even stronger because look, the press is not doing its job. People want to know what happens and they're totally controlled. So that's where the alternative that Mr. Enmias came out, and Malaya and other newspapers come out as a result of this.
So ano po yung emotion, I mean, yung individual siguro ng mga tao dun sa yung on display yung katawan ni Ninoy sa Santo Domingo, and then yung funeral, like, were there people crying?
There were some who were crying, but I think most people were really very angry. Kailangan may mangyayari, there has to be change. And I think that's why many people join. Well, partly curiosity para makita yung coffin or para makita yung body. But I think a lot of people felt it was their duty to do something, to say something. So parang public statement in going to the church, going to the house, participating in the funeral, that is a sign of protest.
So, punta naman po tayo sa September 21. Ano po yung nangyari nung araw na yun?
Yeah, well, kasi September 21 was traditionally, during that time, that was the anniversary of martial law. No, so now we know that it was not signed on September 21, and September 21 really has nothing very much to do with the actual occurrence, but of course it was made to seem like that all the time. Because years na, ginawang Thanksgiving Day pa nga yata yung September 21. And that particular year, 83, kasi it was 1 month after Ninoy's assassination. So exactly 1 month. So ginawa itong day of mourning, National Day of Mourning. And I think as many groups as possible wanted to participate in this para kalampagin ang Malacanang, para sabihin sa mga Marcoses na your time is up, get out. And I think this was really something they were very afraid of because sa lakas ng public emotion against Marcos, this was probably the highest peak. And I think Marcos felt that if he could survive this, okay na sana. And this was one of the really high points. So ang daming galit, ang daming frustrated, a lot of people wanted change. So a major protest rally was scheduled for Iwasan Bonifacio. And dito sa UP, maybe it was the night before, but you made symbolic burning of newspapers, censored newspapers in front of Mascom. And there were minibuses that were taken here to transport the UP contingent to, not to Liwasang Bonifacio, so I don't know where we got off. I think we got off at Welcome Rotonda, tapos naglakad na kami hanggang Liwasang Bonifacio. So it was meant to be almost a whole day protest. So talagang in terms of number of people who participated, I think that was up to that time the biggest number of people who assembled in Liwasang Bonifacio. The flag was lowered to half-mast and nagkaroon ng programa. I think nobody, well, I didn't care what was being said in the program actually, but kasi I was more concerned with looking at the numbers of people, ano ba yung nakalagay doon sa mga placards nila. And you'll see that they really came from all walks of life. Students, employees, artists, urban poor, talagang parang nagkaisa. It was a very big feeling of unity, but also sadness and shock and frustration, and then anger. So I think nandun yung mixture of feelings at that time. And everybody wanted to express outrage at that particular time. So it was parang a whole day program in Liwasang Bonifacio. And then it was so crowded that parang wala ng traffic around, na-clog yung streets and all of that. And as the programs were winding up in Liwasang Bonifacio, there came the cry to go to Mendiola.
Sino po yung
I don't know, basta it just
parang nag-spread?
it just spread. And there were people who were beginning to say, delikado na, something is going to happen if you go to Mendiola. So while there was a move, when there was that sentiment na let's go to Mendiola, there were also people who felt na this is going to be too dangerous na. So a lot of people were saying, hindi na kami sasama sa Mendiola because we know that something is going to happen there.
And pumunta po kayo bakit po kayo pumunta ng Mendiola, sumama? And sino po yung mga parang kasama niyo noon?
Yeah, okay. In that particular day, I was with 3 or 4 co-faculty members, I think. So one of Pichi Santos yata yung isa, basta nagtuturo siya sa department. I think si Evelyn Miranda, Professor Miranda was with us. So I think we were 3 or 4. And then, so we wanted to go together. May sense of excitement and maybe may sense of participation. It's our duty to do something about this. And then when the call that go to Mendiola came, medyo maraming natakot din. Uwi na tayo, that's enough. We already made our statement by being here the whole day. But yung grupo namin, decided, let's go to Mendiola.
Kasama niyo pa rin po sila, Sir Milano?
Yes. So we walked, it's not that long a walk naman from Liwasang Bonifacio, you cross Quezon Bridge, and then you turn into Recto, and then diretso na sa Mendiola. So it was still a sizable group that went there. Maraming umuwi na, but still a large group that went to Mendiola. And we were already hearing na handa na sila doon, their preparations to take care of us. So parang there was that sense of, again, foreboding and fear. And this was late in the day already because natapos na yung programs mga 5 o'clock or 5:30. So by the time we crossed Quezon Bridge, it was already getting dark. Medyo dusk na, mga 6 siguro. And then so by the time we got to Mendiola, it was already dark. 6:37. But tuloy-tuloy, we could see that there were police aligned on the other side. And then yun nga, as I mentioned, we knew that they meant business because may mga fire trucks dun sa likod. And as long as there were fire trucks, you knew that they were going to do something.
Paano kaya po nila nalaman na may breakaway group kung talagang spontaneous na yung naging assembly to Mendiola?
Well, I think they had spies. In fact, just one thing that we all feared was may mga spiya sila sa mga mass movements na yun. So they knew what was going on. So that's why the security was usually very tight. For the UP groups talagang we're not going to let anybody here who might destroy it or who will sow violence within the group. So talagang so each of the groups actually was NGOs was very concerned na baka may government spies dito sa atin. So they were very tight in their security. So actually that was one of my concerns since I was not attached to any particular group at ikot-ikot ako. Baka maisip nila na spy ako din. But yeah, that was one very big fear that many people had, that there are these government agents in. And so I'm sure that's how they knew na even though the program, the original organizers of the program in Liwasan were going to send it will disperse and wala na kami responsibility for what happens after. But it was a breakaway group that continued on to Mendiola beyond the control of the organizers of the Liwasan Bonifacio Valley.
Pero ano po yung composition ng group niyo? Like,
mainly students, I think. Mainly students, mga siguro laborers, mga urban poor, mga ganun. I think the more visible or the more higher up organizers hindi na yata sumama sa grupo.
So wala po kayong kasama doon parang prominent
Yeah,
opposition
I think
leader?
parang wala. So as far as I remember, parang wala. I think mga student leaders, yes, but let's say sinagot sa Aquino o mga matataas na Tanyada, I don't think they were with us because I think the agreement with the government yata at that time was really we will end at this time and that's it, your peaceful dispersal. But yun nga, parang this breakaway groups and we will go to Mendiola.
So wala pong like parang obvious formal organizations leading that group?
No.
Parang talagang
Para sa akin,
nagkayayaan
yeah, parang
po.
spontaneous eh. It was something that was really, it came up just like that. Tuloy tayo sa Mendiola.
And mostly lalaki po yung mga doon? Or
No, it was mixed.
marami rin po?
Maraming babae din. Because this was also before the bigger dispersals. So I think there had not been too many big dispersals yet at that point. So medyo tolerant yung Marcos administration. And of course, the rallies had not really been that big anyway prior to that. But this was really a big one. So
5,000 na po yun.
yeah,
Estimates.
right. So it was big for that time, and then yun na nga, the sentiment of the people was so strong. I think that anyway, parang FQS din siguro yung sentiment na they really wanted to go beyond the police and they probably want to go to the gates of Malacanang. So parang ganun yung sentiment ng ibang tao.
And then pagdating niyo po dun sa Mendiola mismo, nagkaroon po ba ng programa, speeches, like any normal rally?
Yeah, I don't remember if there were. I think there might have been, but parang hindi kasi organized masyado eh. So I don't remember if there was really a program. And the other problem kasi it was really dark. It was already, yeah.
Wala pong parang
Walang malalaking ilaw. It was only basically the street lights, the building lights that were there.
So, by the time you arrived in Mendiola, bigla na lang po sumiklab yung violence?
No, what happened kasi was yun nga, nagkaroon ng tension. I think there must have been some talking between the front line and the police. There must have been some negotiation going on. But by that time, we could also feel that something is going to happen. Parang may feeling in the air that, really tension. You know that there's something going to break out. Na Marcos would not allow this to happen. So parang we felt that it is going to be dangerous. And since kasama ko mga babae, I was maybe one or two, I don't remember who else was, but dalawa yung babae kasama namin, 2 or 3. So it turns out that yung isang kasama namin, I think her name was Peachy Santos, may kilala dun sa isang building, or her husband knew someone in one of the neighboring buildings. This was the Laperal building, which still stands today. Oo. And yung kilala niya owned a gym in the building. So sabi namin, let us seek shelter there. So in case anything happens in Mendiola, we're safe. So we first went into the building, went to see if the gym was open. Nandun yung kilala ni Peachy. And then, yeah, I don't know how we got to the roof, but we managed to get on the roof. So sabi namin, this is safe enough. Let's watch what happens.
Overlooking po yun?
Yeah, overlooking. So kitang-kita namin yung recto, kitang-kita namin yung Mendiola actually. But again, this was night already, so it was quite dark already by that time. So we were on one side of the roof, and then on the other side of the roof were students from the University Bell. So nanonood din sila. And then, I don't remember what happened after that, but I think nag-umpisa na yung gulo doon si Mendiola. And
Sino po yung nag-provoke? I mean, sino
yeah,
first through?
Yeah, that I don't know. Kasi nasa taas na kami ng building, so we were watching and we couldn't really see what was going on that far. But what happened kasi was nagkaroon ng tutukan. We heard parang fireworks lang, firecrackers. And then it so happened that yung sa grupo ng estudyante that were next to us, I remember one of them saying, may tama, may tama. So one of them was hit by bullets. So
Nasa taas.
yeah, so that means binabaril kami. No? So that's when we chose to hide. No? So and then we hid in the gym. And then narinig namin yung dispersal. We heard the shouting and we heard the water cannon, we heard the tear gas. And in fact, I think I had my cassette recorder with me at that time, but I can't find the tape anymore. Kasi I taped some of what was going on, but I dinonate ka yata sa UP archives, but I don't know where it is there. But, so nakatago na kami by that time. And then eventually it became quiet outside, but marami kami naririnig na the fire trucks, with the water cannon, we could hear all of that. And I heard parang may sweeping sound. So I never knew what it was. No? But I taped that, but I cannot find it anymore. So we stayed there, takot na takot kami because, really, we knew it was a violent dispersal. And then may nasaktan nga sa bubong. So how much more on the ground? And we waited maybe for about 2 hours until it really quieted down there. And then we went down and tried to get home. So we could not, since medyo magulo, because, well, tahimik yung recto at that time, but it was really a very uneasy, quiet. And then we had to try to get to Quezon Boulevard, naglakad kami, and we managed to get a taxi, and asked the taxi to take us back to UP. Then we got home. But even the trip back out of Manila back to Quezon City was very scary because part of the siguro sentiment ng mga tao, which was sympathetic to what happened in Mendiola and in Bonifacio. Ang daming naglagay ng mga gulong sa gitna ng kalye at sinunog. And to me, it was a darker night than usual. Of course, that's the impression. Pero we were really afraid that something might happen out of that. So it was a very tense trip back to UP.
Pero may mga tao po sa kalsada?
Mga konti yan. Yeah, there were. Kasi parang, I remember we took Quezon Boulevard on the way back to UP. And there were people as if nothing happened, except for itong mga gulong na susunog. No? And the thing was, almost everywhere you came to Quezon Boulevard and when you got to Quezon City, meron din doon eh. So, parang yung sentiment ng tao was really so strong that this was one way of expressing it. But the problem there again was you don't know what they were going to do. Parang yung sense of galit, yung sense na outrage. How are people going to react? Babasag ba sila ng bote? I mean, we were afraid that it might result in some kind of uncontrollable violence. So we were really very concerned that we better get home as soon as we can. And then I think when I got home, it was very late at night, 10 or 11 as well. I think we listened to the radio and then we heard that a student was shot next to us, was killed, or DOA yata yung nasa hospital.
Naabutan niyo pa po kaya yung parang mga tumatakbo?
Well, we heard,
protesters?
We heard it, but of course by that time nakatawa na kami sa gym. But yeah, we heard all of that takbuhan, all the sigawan.
And then, like, did you see any bodies or wala naman?
No, I didn't. Kasi yun nga, the student who was shot, dinala sa hospital. Of course, binaba siya and we actually didn't have contact with them because it was parang a small division between our side of the roof and their side of the roof. But if you go, every time I take the LRT to Manila, I can still see the Laparal building. And we were on one side. I remember yung letters kasi nandun yung pangalan. So we were on one side. I don't know kung LAP side or the other side, yung RTL side.
Actually, sir, parang burned down na po yung
There-
building na
I
yun.
don't know if it's I don't know. I think they're going to rehabilitate it. I always wanted to take a picture of it, but I never had a chance kasi nandun kami sa taas.
Um, so yung pagkatapos po nung event na yun, may mga individuals or groups na parang ano po yung naging sentiment nila about what happened, especially po yung opposition. Ano po yung naging
Yeah, of course.
say
There
nila?
was a lot of anger at what happened, violent dispersal. Of course, the other thing that worked against them in a sense was the agreement was not to go to Mendiola anyway, that tapusin ang rally dun sa Iwasang Bonifacio. So parang this group went against not the orders, but against the agreement to go to Mendiola. But since it was a violent dispersal, since may namatay, there was a great sense of outrage again after that. So, in fact, parang yun ang naging, that became this whole sequence of events after that. May rally, may violent dispersal, may counter-rally to protest the violent dispersal. So that would not be that would not be the end. Basta it was really, in a way, just parang in a way testing the waters to see how far the government would go in its response. Then after that, calculated na yung response to it. And in fact, even the violent dispersals would serve as propaganda for the anti-Marcos group because tingnan mo yung ginagawa nila. Pinapatay nila yung peaceful protesters. So, oo.
So after po wala na po ulit na, wala na pong naulit na protest sa Mendiola.
There were many.
Oh.
That was only the first big one. As I mentioned to you, I found in my pictures 84, 85. And I was tear gassed in one of those. I mean, again, I was going around with the camera and then bigla na lang tinapon nila yung tear gas. So I didn't expect that. But talagang umiyak ako and all that. So, it was so hard when it's like that kasi it's so hard to find shelter because hindi mo kilala yung mga nasa buildings and who are
Kailan po yung, kasi tinitingnan ko po yung mga parang news accounts sa Mr. English Special Edition. Ang naging notable po yung parang kumbaga pag-iwas ng pagdadala ng mga causes to Mendiola. Parang instead, during that period, 83 to 86, it was always either Iwasang Bonifacio or Ayala Avenue. Pero hindi po naging, well at least kung doon po sa pinagbabasihan ko yung news accounts, parang wala pong nakita.
But there were several and I don't know why it would not have been reported because in fact again I would meet people there. Yung mga kilala ko, I think si Ben Cervantes was there. Once yung classic picture na yung water cannon sila doon and they were arrested. That was in Mendiola. So there were several very photogenic incidents that took place after that.
But was it always violent or
Not always.
yung 83 po yung talagang pinaka?
83 was very violent, but I think yung 85 was violent also. And I don't remember why 85. I think so like for yung date, it was July. That was on August 21. August 21, 85 yata yun. Yung second anniversary of the assassination, which was a very big protest movement again. And then that again met with violent dispersals sa Mendiola.
Yung very big protest na po yung August 21, 85, was it in Mendiola or?
I think again it started in
Iwasang
Iwasang Bonifacio, then it moved to Mendiola. Kasi the problem with Mendiola is it's not big enough for a big crowd. Yung Iwasang Bonifacio, okay, you can have a big crowd there which can spill over into the streets. But sa Mendiola talagang you're contained, it's very contained.
So, ngayon po halos wala nakakaalala na nangyari nung gabi ng September 21, 83, despite the fact na naging super violent yung event na yun. And actually, naging problem po yun events for me. Like, when I was looking for news accounts on that night, and nakakita ko lang pong reportage ay ng Daily Bulletin at ng Daily Express and Bulletin Today. Pero syempre pro Marcos po sila. And yung alternative press, halos wala po silang...
Again, the alternative press was still weighing its... kasi the problem with the alternative press was they could be shut down at any time. And if they were not shut down, there were various ways of controlling them, like yung paper, yung ink, hindi pa payagan yun. So the alternative press had to weigh its sides. So if you're looking for stories like this, try looking at the foreign press, especially with like Asia Week, Far Eastern Economic Review, Time and Newsweek. Those would have coverage.
Actually, nakita ko pong isa, nag-iisa sa Mr. and Miss. And it was parang timeline po of events during that night. It was actually by an Associated Press reporter.
Yes.
And another
That's
one,
right,
news account from the Straits Times ng Singapore.
Right.
So yun po yung mga nakita ko nga. And isang exception po was the Philippine Collegian. I saw it.
I think it was free kasi yung Collegian.
And then napaka-graphic po nung reportage nila ng gabing yun.
Because the major thing was really censorship, which very few people remember. When you talk about martial law, that's one reason why many people think it was peaceful and it was a nice time to live, because censored. You didn't know about the violence in Mindanao. You didn't know about the violence in other parts of everything was whitewashed.
And so, yung hindi po pag-aalaala nung nangyari yun, ano po yung take niyo doon? I mean, considering your fear and all those people who died, ano po yung
to me, kasi it was part of a process which eventually culminated in February 86. So even that noise barrage in 78, I know that was one that was very risky because for most of us, it was the first time that had ever happened. So we didn't know how the government would react. To me, parang, although very violent in dispersion, it was really one of several steps. And again, the bigger event would have been February 86, which I was also involved in. But I think these particular events, especially yung September 21, 83, I think that has to be better known kasi most people really forget. It's really August 21, okay, assassination, but then what were the consequences of that? So hindi naman tayo natutulog at that time. We were expressing our disgust, we were expressing our anger, and that's why I think it needs a little more publicity. But again, considering that it was one of many other rallies that built up after that, siguro that's why people have forgotten about it, because although it was very bloody, there were many that followed after that, and it was just the first of several that occurred.
So, punta po tayo sa last set of questions. So, ito pong mga naging karanasan niyo sa Mendiola, yung mga na-witness niyo pong events. Madalas po ba itong naikukwento sa ibang tao?
In fact, it's the first time I really talked about it. Well, ever since you mentioned that yung message kayo, I mentioned some of it to my wife in passing, but I've never really talked about it. Even my students don't know about it.
So, dun po sa, siguro po after na interview na to, do you feel the need to like relate to other people yung nangyari, and siguro po how and why?
Yeah, I think now that you mention it, and now that there is, I realize it's time na magkaroon ng documentation. Well, I think interviews with the participants would be necessary because again, we take it for granted na nandito pa sila, but actually that's already 30 years, 30
Yeah.
years now. So actually, I was just talking with some other people that the key people are already gone. The organizers are no longer with us. So ngayon, it's mga participants lang. So I think it's something that has to be better documented and better understood. Maybe not only that, but the whole sequence of events after August 21, because people have forgotten. And that was a very dramatic, very tense period.
1983. So,
Yeah, 83, even 84, 85 naman dispersals. And it's because of that continuing pressure that caused Marcos to say the snap elections, no? Saying the snap elections, which he could not back down from. But if those things did not continue, he would have continued on kasi he endured already 83 na tapos na, but since tuloy-tuloy pa yung protests and he did not weaken, then he was forced to do something about it.
pero po yung sense of tension na yun during 1983, how was this relate to like the rest of siguro at least Metro Manila population who weren't actually participating in the
Yeah.
mobilizations if
Oo.
censored yung media?
Yeah, that was a big problem, of course. So, people who would not hear about it would not, of course, know about what happened and would not participate. So that was one, in a sense, parang controlling mechanism ni Marcos to keep the media under his control was a very, very significant thing. Kaya siguro not too many people know what happened because controlled by media. And you would hear about it only from indirect accounts or foreign media. But there was no major press coup at that time. So a lot, even in Mindanao, they would not have known about it. Kaya hindi naging national, it didn't spread as big, as largely as people would have wanted to.
And nagkaroon pa nga po ng romanticization
Yes. So,
ng period ni Marcos.
so it's just that the people who were there, very few have written about it, and then usually they write about it as part of a larger movement, memoir. So, as a specific era, let's say just that year, 1983 or 1984, there's nothing on that specifically. So if you go out, even in the web, you won't find anything. And knowing that now, to me kasi it was just part of participating in the process of ousting Marcos. So when he was ousted, tapos na, you forget about it. It's just now, after 30 years, na you realize that people don't realize what happened anymore. So kailangan ng tingnan ulit and revive their memories.
Sir, kailan po kayo huling napunta sa Mendiola? And
Let's see. Well, I was there in 86, no, during when the People Power Revolution ended. The day after we were there, so I picked up a lot of papers, flags, and whatever. The next day, also inside Malacanang, I got to Malacanang. And then I think we went there a couple of other times when a friend was visiting from the States. We went to Mendiola, we went to Malacanang, kasi museum pa siya at that time. So, but we walked around the Mendiola area. And sometimes, I've been to Malacanang a few times for various affairs. But, I've seen the bridge, and of course, going to Manila by LRT, you always pass Mendiola, you always see it. No? So to me, it's changed a little kasi may marker na peace arch. So to me, it's a little different. Then kung minsan there, you still have the police there, but to me, it's different now. It's no longer the same tension.
wala po yung ganun feel pa
Wala
rin
yun.
before.
Kasi mas open na yung environment ngayon. There's no controlled media.
And last question po. Yung, sa tingin niyo po, bakit po pupunta yung mga tao sa Mendiola?
Now or then?
Now siguro and then po.
Now, well, of course, people have to go to Mendiola because the schools are there. So others go because business, and that's a business opportunity. And then going to Malacanang and the community inside the San Miguel area. there are residents, so people forget that people stay in houses there. So it's a thriving residential community also. So that's why you have a variety of people there all the time. But then I don't know who goes there to reminisce. Well, I have not gone there to reminisce. But every time I go there, it's for something. But yeah, maybe one of these days I should go back. But I mean, every time I see the lateral building, I remember what happened that night. No? But I don't go down and stop and walk.
Kasi nga po wala na yung ganun ding
Yeah.
atmosphere.
Oo.
So,
And the one other thing I think is, with some groups kasi, or let's say, if you fight in wars or something, there are usually veterans organizations, so you have the unions. This particular case, since they were a whole mixture of people, how do you get these people back together? Unless, let's say, they're really cause-oriented groups, or even Jaja, I don't think Jaja exists anymore. Atom, I don't think Atom is around anymore.
Umbrella groups.
Oh, umbrella groups. No, so you have other ones, yung Zelda, you have the task force detainees and things like that. That have the unions once in a while, but these are small sectors of society compared to the groups that participated in Mendiola and in Luasan Bonifacio before. So you can't ever get them back together because wala na yung ano eh. So how do you get all these people to remember what they did when I think too many of them, it's we did our job, we participated there, tama na yun, we are enjoying the fruits of it, so that's it. But very few will tell it to their children or to the younger generation.
I think that's about it, sir. Thank you very much for I'm currently parang revising the draft, so when it's finished, I'll show it
Yeah.
for your comments.
If you want to see the pictures, I segregated them.